Feel free to go up to the bar. Belly up to the bar, as they say. Get something. Hey, great weather, huh? Isn't this good? Unfortunately, we had to cancel one of our presentations a couple weeks ago because of snow, but we'll have Jim Baker back. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But we thank you all for coming this evening, and welcome. St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center welcomes all of you here too. The Auras, we're a little bit farther, but we love the Auras. Dick Reminger, thank you so much. Let's give him a hand. We did have all of our presentations over at the museum, and we've got a nice little theater room, but it only holds 60 maybe, and that's kind of elbow to elbow, really. So everyone kind of likes to come over here and spread out a little bit, but of course we always hope that you go back to the museum and you know, take a look. Take a look around. 2 floors of a lot of stuff over there. How many of you are members of the museum?
That's what I thought, but I was like, that's
all right. Well, we've got room for improvement here. Let me tell you this. If you decide to become a member of the museum, you can use tonight's admission price toward your membership, and they'll take care of you in the back there this evening before you leave, if you like. No pressure there, no pressure. Our museum is supported strictly by memberships, also by admission sales at the gate, if you will, gift shop sales, donations, and sponsorships. Tonight's program is sponsored by Don Hyatt Oil Company, so let's hear it for Don Hyatt Oil Company. A few things coming up you might want to be aware of at the museum. Watch for our lab and fossil ID days. Bring in those curious finds and find out if it's a real fossil or maybe just a rock. But a lot of people think, oh, this has got to be something. They're sure it's a dinosaur bone. But Mike, I guess you've seen a lot of those, and they're just sure it's something. It's not really that something, but it's something to them. So Mike and Guy and a few of the others, they can set you straight on what you might have found in your backyard of the North 40. Our speaker series is going very well, so we've got tonight's presentation, of course, but coming up on March 12th, Jim Baker, as I mentioned, we had to cancel his presentation a couple of weeks ago. He'll be back. What the tour guides don't tell you. He's got that presentation for us, and that's kind of a fun one. March 26th, Ralph and Leela Portel will present Alaska, the Final Frontier. Now that'll be a neat one. They've lived in Alaska for 20 some odd years, and they can tell you all the best places to visit, the fishing holes, if you will, the rafting capabilities up there, and just all kinds of things. So if you've ever thought about going to Alaska, if it's on your bucket list, you might want to come to their presentation. That'll be on March 26th. We don't have a date, but probably sometime in April, we will relive the flood of '93. Everyone knows what they were doing during the flood of '93. So we've got a lot of neat stories, and I'm sure everyone has a story to tell on that. So as soon as we get that date, we'll pass that along to you, but that'll be an interesting one. On April 11th, we will bring you mouse races right here at the Oris Theater, and tickets are $25, and that will include 2 drinks, by the way. And I don't like mice. I don't like them at all. When I see them around my house, or you don't like them, but they will be contained here, hopefully. Dick hopes they'll be contained here too, because he doesn't want a lot of mice running around, but those are always fun. A lot of people go to those, and the mouse races will be, again, on April 11th, so please mark your calendar for that. And something we just started for the little dino fans, and maybe even the bigger dino fans, and that's a birthday party at the museum. We've got some fun things for them to do, and we'll give them a docent-led tour of the museum, and it'll just be kind of fun. And we'll use the theater room up there. They can bring their cake and have some treats and stuff up there, and I think it'll be fun. So we've got that going. So lots of things going on at the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center, so I hope you avail yourself of all of our happenings there, because we feel it's quite a gem for St. Genevieve. So please go and take a look. Now tonight, the Chester Airfield is our topic of conversation, and tonight we welcome Charlie Bargman, Bob Lockhart, and Tammy Grah, and they'll take us back to the 1940s when young servicemen were learning to fly for the Army Air Forces during World War II at what is now the Perryville Airport. It's a fascinating story, and we again thank Don Hyle Oil Company for sponsoring this presentation. And please welcome our guests.
Once again, I'm Charlie, and Bob's over here, and Tammy's over here, and I don't know why Tammy's name isn't on the screen, except she made the screen, so I think we know how, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her PowerPoint. Yeah. So once again, I want to share this with you. I'm going to surprise her. The military realized the importance of air power, and the Air Corps of 1939 had 20,000 men, 2,400 planes. The Air Corps of 44 had 2.4 million personnel, huge number. 2.4 million and 80,000 planes. So, okay, Tammy.
Okay, I'm going to talk. Give me the microphone for just a moment, please. I'm Tammy Grah. I worked at the Chester Library for over 30 years, and part of my responsibility was to do local history programs. Jim here came over and helped me out. Bob, I'm sorry. I was thinking of Jim Baker when she said that. I was trying to think of his name, and that was it. Stephanie Jim was who came over. Bob came over and helped me with some programs there, so it's just something that I enjoy doing. And we put this program together, like Charlie said, about 2 or 3 years ago.
On the anniversary.
On the anniversary.
The 80th.
Of the beginning of, or the end of it.
No, beginning.
Beginning of it,
Beginning.
I guess, yes. So none of us are experts on the airfield. I just want to make it really clear that I was not around in the 1940s, just in case you were wondering. I don't know, Bob, Charlie, are you? No, I didn't think so.
Bob, late.
But anyway, just happened to work at a place where some of the information about this presentation is available. Bob and Charlie supplied a lot of information, and we especially need to thank Barbara from the Perryville Regional Airport. Barbara's, I don't know, I've never met Barbara. She's not here this evening, is she? I know she might have liked to have been here, but anyway. So keep that in mind. We're not experts, but if you have any questions from our research, we'd be glad to try to answer them as we go along the way. Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about your background? Bob's kind of our aviation guy, wouldn't you say that,
Yeah,
Charlie?
yeah.
When you want to know about how these airplanes work, he's the guy. And Charlie's just been doing a lot of research on this. So we appreciate you being here this evening, and we're going to do our best to not make this too Chester, but that is who we did this program for, was for the folks over in Chester. And Charlie, you want to take it from here, though?
Yeah.
We'll go to the next slide, Steph.
So do I need to read that, or can you all read? So I'm trying to find a place I'm comfortable. And I think I found it. Right in Bob's way. So as you can see, the numbers up there, I felt it was important just to remind everybody, and so we've got December of 41. We can't forget Pearl Harbor, and it kind of tied in with the bridge. And so any questions about anything you're seeing up there? So we're starting with Pearl Harbor, but actually 42, and then in 47 it was declared surplus.
Ready? All right, I'm going to take the microphone for just a second, Charlie. Okay, stepping over to the next one.
There.
This is the Chester Bridge. I do a presentation on the Chester Bridge, and it was just an important part of why the airfield was called Chester Airfield, because the bridge had just opened. During the construction of the airfield, the bridge had just truly been opened. Anybody know what that little, anybody know what that's going to be? The toll booth. Anybody remember paying the toll to get across the Chester Bridge? A lot of folks do. So the area over to the left is where our Welcome Center would be now.
Yeah,
so you see how much had to be done with the bridge. So I just have a few pictures of the bridge just to give you a time frame. So, yep, next one. There it is. And of course, you all know we're getting a new bridge now. That's going to cost a little bit more than this one, trust me. Next slide. This is the view from Missouri. Just getting the bridge connected. Again, this was in 1941. Next slide. Sunday, August 23rd, 1942 is when it opened. Next slide. Here, I thought this one was a good one. To our neighbors across the river, we extend sincerest greetings. The merchants of Chester recognize the New Chester Bridge as a great economic and social asset to both Illinois and Missouri. And it goes on to say, let's all go forward via the New Chester Bridge. Next slide. Anybody know the rest of the Chester Bridge history? Just 2 years after it was open, it fell in the river. There's a bad storm that came through. This says tornado. I think research from that point will really tell us it was a straight line winds. Would you agree with that? I mean, there's a little bit of both. But you can see it was insured for $1 million, $1,080,000. You can see the boys kind of looking over the bank there. That's right behind our courthouse over in Chester. The 2 center spans fell in the river. Next slide. Just another view of it. Crazy when you think about during World War II when there were so many rations and steel was so hard to get. You know, we built it twice. Kind of crazy to think about all that. But it was a bridge that connected us to Missouri, which therefore connected us to the Chester Airfield.
The new one is right here.
Yep, and the new one's just upriver a little bit. And boy, is that a project. So that's a bit about the Chester Bridge and how that kind of played into the naming of the facility and how important Chester became to something that was over here in Missouri. All right, Charlie, it's up to you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. How many are military veterans in here? Do you recognize any of these uniforms down here? Can you imagine showing up? What about that? Does that look familiar? Do you want me to read that, or can you guys do it? There's that 102 number. They were hoping to train 102,000 pilots in a year from 43 to 44. From what I understand, they achieved 93,000 trained.
Charlie just doesn't want to say that boy brulee. I don't know if I'm saying it.
I don't. Boyce Brule is all I've. Brulee?
I say boy brulee, but I could be wrong. But it was one of 50 training facilities.
So there were 3 levels. We had a primary at Chester, and you went through the primary, and you were there about 9 weeks, and you got 60 hours of training, and then you went to from the primary to the basic, and from the basic to the advanced. Advanced probably meant multi-engine. So I spent a lot of time on microfilm, and then Tammy was good enough to find copies of the paper that she actually took pictures of and put them up here. So preliminary work starts. And once again, this was from the Chester perspective. I don't know that. Do you guys know of anybody that from St. Genevieve? Surely people from St. Genevieve went down there and worked. I don't know if you know anybody that did that or not, but I would assume that there were quite a few there. And talking with Bob on the way over, that trying to get these guys these hours, you can imagine they're tearing up some equipment. And I heard that the repair station was working 24/7, keeping the planes under.
Look at the price of the paper.
That's part of the reason I put the whole front page, or a portion of it, is to look at the different headlines of the time. It just gives you some more.
Yes, we always got sidetracked, and we didn't necessarily keep on focus. Yeah.
Okay. You good?
I'm good.
Want to talk about that one at all? About the homes?
Go ahead. Which one would you need to go back one?
No, that's all right. They just, one of the things that was important is that they needed places for these people to live, these gentlemen to live. So you'll see several headlines that talk about the priority given for 20 new houses. And We're not sure if they were just for the officers. We've kind of heard that. A little further down, you'll see a slide of what those homes actually look like now. But that was another part that they were annexed into the town, this area past the park. I don't know if you know where Cole Park is, or a swimming pool was, and that part, that is where those houses are. You can see Chester Field is nearing completion, and that was in April of 43. Bus line to Chester Field is going to start in April, so a lot of the headlines in our paper there were towards the airfield.
Did they have any housing actually in the Perryville area, or was it all in Chester?
Yeah, it said they needed houses, and you go ahead, Charlie.
So what my research indicated was that they built 20 to 30 homes, and a lot of them are still occupied there in Chester. And I have not done the research from the Prairieville perspective, so I don't know that. And one story I heard was that the officers, who were probably pilots, would take the planes home and land them in a field and then come back. I thought that was kind of neat, even though the bridge was there.
We did have a service club in Perryville and one
So,
in Chester.
and I did see one of the articles mentioned that they did a flyover of Perryville and all that kind of stuff, trying to sell war bonds and whatever. So once again, we're at April of 43. Want to do the next one? Anybody got any questions about?
So cadets are going to be there.
So
Okay.
first contingent of cadets arrived. I've got a story that Tammy's not aware of. Bill Lang, who provided our airplanes for us, he couldn't be here. He's got COVID, so he can't be here tonight. But he told this story that they brought down a flight of 20 of the Stearmans, the bi-wings, from Parks Air College there in Cahokia. They brought down 20, and they had a crosswind on the new runways, and they got none of the planes on the ground without some damage. Go ahead.
Were the runways originally concrete?
No, the runways were 2,000-foot sod, and they spent $25,000 for the sod, which is about $400,000 in today's dollars. But they had two parallel, same orientation of what the one is down there now, but two sod runways. Major flood threatens. Guess what happened?
Next one.
How about that? Father, son, grandson, all around. How does that, So people wonder, this is the question that I often had too. Will they build it back? So what happened was they opened it in May of 43. In June of 43, they had 8 feet of water in their new facility. So that's the question they're asking up here. Will they build it back?
Anderson Airport.
Anderson was the civilian provider. They were the They were the flying school. Was Anderson.
As I was putting this together, I thought this paragraph was pretty interesting when it's underneath the headline where people wonder if the airport will leave the community. About the third paragraph down, it said, when the flood came, many people believed the airport would not be flooded for the last time. That section was underwater was in 1922. And at that time, the reason that in 1922 it flooded is because there were no levees and that there had been no major floods since that time. That covered the fertile land in the area of the airport. But when the levee broke at Claryville, Sunday, the Anderson Air Activities mustered every employee and everything was moved out, lock, stock, and barrel, and brought to Chester. So Stephanie talked about the 93 flood, and we all remember wondering if that levee was going to break. And you know, they thought they had it fixed back in the 40s, but obviously they didn't. Some of the pictures on the front of the paper there are from
Chester
Riverfront. Back then, the railroad ran right along the river, and so right now the railroad is up on a levee. So it, we don't get water up any higher like this. And those buildings, of course, were all torn down in the 50s.
Early 50s.
50s or so. I wasn't there then either, FYI. And so you can see that it was a big deal. It constant flooding for decades, obviously. So some of the other headlines too are rather fascinating. Next slide. I'm just going to stand up for a little bit.
Yes.
I'm going to do some of these newspaper things. Government takes bids to repair the air training school. Will take 6 weeks to repair the Anderson Air School. So it's pretty amazing to me that they stuck it out. And maybe that's part of the reason not many of us know much about this, is because it really was only here for 2 years, and they weren't able to make it sustainable. The floods didn't help. The war ended. Those kind of things. Okay. Just a few more headlines. Bottomland flooded for the second time. Studies show about the housing situation, and those houses are still going to come up. Buy a bond and get a free trip to the airport. I don't think any of us really realize how important those war bonds. All the military folks and everybody was pushing to buy war bonds, and we see this over and over and over in the papers. Bus lines to Chester, the contractor who gets the job to repair it all.
Work starts.
It was just, seems like it was an ongoing repair project. Blackout tonight. That's another thing most of us don't know anything about, but it was a very, serious, dangerous time back then in the 1940s. This goes through the list of blackout regulations and how all that impacted the people. The federal housing was going to be ready in 2 weeks. Public invited for inspection of the cadet club. So can't help but wonder what that was like. I don't know if there's anything else on there about
Flying school at work Monday.
I'm sorry?
Middle of the right-hand paper.
What am I looking at? Oh, flying school. Flying school at work Monday. Anderson Air Activities brings new group of cadets. Charlie, there were, we'll talk about that in a little bit, 6 group?
G, A through G.
A through G. Okay. Those are the houses we've been talking about. You wouldn't think they're not too fancy for officer housing, but that's what they look like. And this was a picture taken a couple of years ago. I just went out there and snapped a picture.
And they're all brick construction.
Very similar, as you can see. But they're, a lot of them are still around.
Where are those at?
They're past the Chester Park.
Out past the pool area.
On Route 3 South. Riverview.
Riverview, yes.
Is the name of the road. Okay. Of course, they went on with their regular lives. A couple of marriages over at the church at St. John's. You can see the front page was all covered with our servicemen. First graduating class of cadets was ready for combat. Several returned to field last week on visit, and that was in 1943. Okay.
So November.
Air training at Anderson Field stops. So just like that, of course, like Charlie said, they went through G, so there were a few classes that went through, but this was our little summary in newspaper articles that we started with tonight. Okay. Now this is what Barbara was able to give us from the airport. Now there's a copy of this in this binder, and this is always available at the Chester Public Library. It doesn't get checked out. Let me bring it along tonight. So if you ever would really like to look at more closely at these slides, this is where you would do that, and I'll have it here after the presentation. So Flightlines was a publication that that they put together actually at the airfield.
You're 44F.
So that was that group. Okay, next slide. All right, and I'll let you take it from here, Charlie, about some of the activities there.
You're doing such a good job. So, once again, the dates, they started in 43 and the program went away in 44, so really 12 months. And they spent $400,000 then, which is $6 million today for that project. So we meet our instructors. And Bob pointed out, if you look at the uniforms of some of the instructors, we're guessing that some of them were from different countries because they're trying to train this 102,000 pilots, of which they achieved 93,000. So here they are. Bob, I think, pointed out the hats. The hats are significant, maybe different countries. Commissioned officers. So what they built over there were 3 hangars, a hospital, administration building, barracks, mess hall, water, sewage, all that for the $6 million. Here they are. I've often thought, and I guess I ought to do the research, just pick one and figure out if he survived or didn't survive and where they went. And once again, this was primary. This is where you washed out or didn't wash out. You had check rides at 20, 40, and 60 hours. Bob is saying that if you don't get your check ride in by 20 hours, do your solo by 20 hours, you're probably out of the program. So here we got another, what was that, E?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another class.
They're all smiling. Okay. We put these in a lot just to see if people would recognihad some of the names.
Yeah, we haven't found any name that was local that had what we had access to anyway.
Okay.
So Bob, you want to talk about this trainer over here?
That's not really a training aircraft of sorts, but it is something that was used quite heavily by the military. It's a link trainer, and basically it gives you a certain range of motion, and I understand that they actually had like a camera projecting scenery in the front of that on the inside, and people have been known to get disoriented to the point that they actually tried to bail out of this thing, and it was fairly embarrassing if you did that. But you learned the layout of the instruments, what the instruments actually told you, and the link trainer, basically you were flying blind. You had some idea from the film, but you were just basically going by the feel and what the instruments were telling you. And it was a way to give you simulated flight experience without having to wreck an expensive piece of equipment. I was telling Charlie on the way over, they built basically about 8,500 of the Stearman. This was a Boeing design. Of that 8,500, they built a further 2,000 out of bits and pieces from wrecked ones. So they had roughly 10,000 of those in all. And it was the first airplane you started flying. This was for the Army and the Navy. By and large, you learned how to get into the air and back onto the ground in the Stearman. And being a tail dragger and having a fairly narrow landing gear, if you wind up on the runway sideways, you're going to wind up tearing up the lower wing. This is the second machine you would have probably flown at Anderson School. That's a Fairchild. It had a much wider landing gear. However, they both had about the same top speed, and they both landed somewhere right around 50 miles an hour. But it was much easier to handle on the ground than this Stearman. If you slammed on the brakes too hard with this, you would do a nose over, and you could even wind up upside down. And when Charlie was telling you of the 21st Stearmans that came into Chesterfield, most of them wound up kind of sideways in that crosswind because the wind would be coming from the side. It would grab your tail rudder and just slip you sideways, and you would do what was called a ground loop. And you would wind up dragging a wingtip. And that tears up the wingtip, so that aircraft is unserviceable until it can be repaired. And they had repair facilities at the site, and many a mechanic spent the night working on these airplanes to get them ready to go in the morning. And he had to sign off on that aircraft that it was in service before anyone could fly it. And then the pilot had to inspect it, and he had to sign off on it. And he actually signed for that airplane while he was flying it. And if he had anything happen in that flight, he had to note it in the logbooks and had to notify the chief mechanics that it was what the problem was and what he thought it was concerned. And then they would go and try to repair it and have it ready to go either later that day or the next morning or as soon as possible. And I will send you back to Charlie.
Another story. Tammy's heard all our stories. I found this one interesting. This one came from Bill again, and he can't be here because he's ill. But whenever they were flying in these, the instructor was up front, my understanding, and he had a hose that he yelled through to the guy sitting in the back, and the guy in the back had no concept of communication with the pilot. And one of the stories goes that it was check ride time, and they're checking you out with when you're doing your maneuvers and all that kind of stuff. And they always say, do what the instructor does. Well, the instructor had been known to unscrew his stick and throw it out. And that way, the poor guy in the back end knows, how are we getting down? Me, you know. And so the one guy took an extra stick one time, and he did what the pilot did. Pilot threw his out, and he reaches up and taps the instructor and throws his out. So can you imagine what the instructor was thinking up front? Here we are, how do we get down? So I don't know if you like that story. I don't know how to substantiate it, but it's a good story. So what else have we got, Tammy? We got another slide? Chance to solo, and once again, there's the check rides up there at the 20, 40, and 60 hours. Some of you have heard this perhaps. When it got time to solo, they didn't want to tie up the airfield. So it's my understanding, maybe some of you have some knowledge of this. I was over on Kaskaskia Island the year we gave the presentation and asked some of the people at the 4th of July celebration if they knew where the solo field was, because they didn't want to tie up the two parallel, and so they'd send you out to Kaskaskia Island where there was a field. And I got some wishy-washy kind of ideas. And another one that you people wouldn't be aware of, but I'm going to mention it. You've all heard of Rockwood. When you go to Chester, you go to Carbondale, and you go to Rockwood. Down in there, that's Mississippi River bottoms again. They said there was an auxiliary field down there at Cora, but I have not run into anybody that has any knowledge of the field at Cora, though they were familiar with the one on Kaskaskia Island.
So when you say field, you mean landing strips?
Yeah, it's just a landing strip. There wasn't any facilities there that I'm aware of. Next slide.
Here's the one with the speaker tube.
Can you see the speaker tube?
Yeah, it was kind of like a funnel with a hose that ran back to the headset on the student pilot. And it was a one-way communication.
You listened and did.
Look at the cartoon images on the bottom. That would probably be a better depiction of how they felt.
Life insurance. Once again, another building that you guys may or may not be familiar with, but where the blazing color was up at the three-way intersection. I understood in the upper level of that, they used to pack parachutes up there. And so, you know, everybody did their part in the war effort. So there's the tower and part of the administration building, I'm guessing. Here's part of the repair crew. See the
They're working on a
stand?
tail wheel.
I'm a reader. I worked at the library, so I don't know if you can read some of the small print, but there's a few paragraphs that kind of stood out to me as interesting, so bear with me on this one. The first paragraph there says, nursemaids carrying monkey wrenches and wiping grease all off their faces with red handkerchiefs. They keep us flying after wings have been scraped, props bent from sudden, inexperienced stops, and instruments jarred from bumpy landings. They are the men and women who work day and night shifts to have each plane marked ready to fly. In the morning, and not with a red cross that means grounded for repairs. So like Charlie was saying, you can see the packing the parachutes, right, the ladies on the left. I have no idea what the guy on top is doing.
He's repairing the ring.
Hey, I knew that one.
Those were fabric covered wings.
I don't- You want to say that out loud? I had no idea that they were fabric wings.
Yep.
Very, very interesting. And then Charlie was just getting ready to tell you a little bit about the air tower. I don't know if there's any more you want to say about
No,
that, Charlie?
I don't
Then let's
believe-
see the next slide.
That's the flight line.
This is the flight line. I know nothing about airplanes. I don't know if Bob or Charlie, you want to expand on that a little bit?
So as you can see, there's a goodly number of the Stearmans. And what do we got over here, Bob? That looks like a
That's not a
T6 Texan.
Fairchild.
Looks like a T6 Texan to me,
Sort of.
trainer. But you can see, and what they found was, even though that is what they had to train with, and you're just learning how to get it back on the ground more than anything else, the Stearman was very, very durable. And with the, that's the 17, this is the 19. One of the requirements for this was that you use very few essential materials to build it out of. And part of the reason that you guys have probably seen some bi-wings flying around, the Stearmans, is that they were made a little more soundly than these. These were oftentimes made out of plywood and fabric. And they went south in humidity, and guess what happened to the plywood? It delaminated. So there aren't very many of these that survived.
Okay, next one.
So here's F.
That's the second last class.
So like I say, that to me looks like a not what we would think. So there's the Stearman, and they were open cockpit typically, although the Canadian Air Force, they had a few that they put canopies on because of the colder weather conditions. And most of these 50 airfields were in from the beach of the coast and in the central U.S., and there were several in Missouri. Go ahead. So can you imagine? This is Chester.
I have to read this one. This is another one I like to read, so it's a little bit long, but there's some really good information in it, and I hope you enjoy hearing it as much as I did. For a great many months, we had worked and studied to complete the various phases of military training, such as basic instruction, college training, classification period, and pre-flight school at Maxwell. And all of the time we were waiting, hoping and praying for the day when we would come, when flying would become a reality. That day was very close now, for the train on which we were traveling northward would soon be bringing us to our next and most exciting step of all, primary flight training. At previous posts, we had listened patiently to numerous stories of experiences that surround the lives of potential pilots, and in a little while we would live with those same experiences. We were at this moment in reality featherless eagles just on the verge of sprouting wings, so close to flying that we could almost hear the roar of the husky radial engines, feeling the wind of the slipstream whip into our face, and see the ground slipping slowly away from underneath. We soar as we soar into the high heavens. As the train slowly came to a halt next to the little depot at McBride, Missouri, in the early morning of December 5th, all of us let out a wild whoop. We're here at last. Yes, we were here, but not quite. Still 5 miles from our destination. As we stepped off the train, we could see a bright white lantern up ahead. As the light grew brighter, we could see the silhouette of a solitary figure, the station master. He motioned us to get onto 2 large buses, which would take us to our new home. The ride over dirt roads lasted but several minutes, and as we approached the airport, one by one sleepy heads popped up. Everyone wanted to catch the first glimpse of their new home. Right up to the very gates we set tense and alert so not to miss anything. As the buses drew to a stop, we all scrambled out and dashed through the gate, shouting in unison, "So this is Chesterfield." Now, we all know what McBride's like now, you know, think about that. And can you imagine these city young men, most of them we, assume came from larger metropolitan areas.
Probably had some college.
Some, background in college education, and definitely other military training. And here they take him to McBride, and it was dirt roads. There's going to be a picture coming up of McBride Hill as a dirt road. And we all can imagine what that must have been like, seeing that over in the bottoms there. But I just thought that was an interesting perspective of them coming to Chesterfield.
Go ahead. Next one.
Next, Stephanie, you can go next.
There it is.
It's
Go ahead.
their day. Some of the things that went on, just little casual shots of the day. Smile of health, getting mail, spare time. You can see a little bit of like the barracks after dinner. I like these pictures because they just showed what everyday life was for these young men as they were training to become pilots.
Looks pretty bare bones, just raw rafters up there, no
That's
ceilings or whatever.
So then they talked about night. So over on the left there where the ladies sitting, that was part of their own club where the hostess was always ready to help them planning an evening. Different social activities in the evening. They would go bowling into the movies in Chester, and they talked about going to Perryville too. In the second paragraph it says, into Chester, into Perryville, the quicker the better. Tell the driver to switch on both mags. Everybody makes a joke about the bus, sing songs, off key but loud, anything but hurry up and get us there. So they were ready for some social time as well. Of course, they studied as well. This talks about their daily training, the calisthenics, and different activities. Physical training at the 74th is 90 minutes of pleasure time, 90 minutes spent playing games that interest the cadets the most. Basketball, football, all the traditional sports. You can see that in this publication. Okay. Again, just some of the instructors that were on the left. There are the gentlemen who actually put these flight lines together. This magazine, you can see the art and photography. The guy down there at the bottom that says art, he would have been the one with all those cartoon characters throughout.
And this person?
We put this one in because if you do the next slide, the second lady we know is a lady from Chester. Of course, she's passed since, but maybe you recognize some of the names. Winifred Sugard, I know would have been a Chester lady as well.
Ham.
Alice Welton, Edna Lindenberg, Marguerite Ham, Mrs. Laura Killian, Bernice Moeller, and Anna Grah. But these are secretaries, clerical workers there, we believe. Okay. This is the McBride Hill when it was a dirt road. I thought that was kind of fun. Bottom, when we could start at the top of McBride Hill and coast in our automobiles all the way to the railroad tracks. Looks a little different. This is where we ate, where we lived, played, and had fun.
Tammy?
Yes. Oh gosh.
Uh-oh, another oh gosh moment. One of the guys a year younger than I talked about his dad being in high school during this time, and 17-year-old boy and the Chester girls were all enthralled with the uniformed guys. The poor local guys didn't have a chance, is what my friend's father said. That The uniform attracted all the ladies.
That and money.
And maybe a way out, I don't know. When it talks about where they played, it says if an ice cream sundae, a milkshake, or a soda were wanted, the adjacent canteen was a place to go. Our favorite drink or tidbit, a great many pilot experiences were told. And I thought this one was kind of interesting. Today I did a loop all by myself. Boy, did I go up and over. Yep, I made 6 perfect landings at Kaskaskia. My instructor congratulated me on passing the 40-hour check. So this, makes reference to that airstrip in Kaskaskia, which we honestly just don't know much about.
Part of the problem is there was an airport at Kaskaskia that was a private strip.
Yes, I don't know if you could hear.
If this was part of the Army's deal or if it was started later.
Apparently someone in Kaskaskia owned an airplane and had their own private landing strip. And whether he allowed the military to utilize that or if this is in addition to, we just don't know much about it. Just some casual pictures throughout again. Next slide.
Oh, this is funny.
And this is the canteen. I just thought this was really kind of cute. This was the cover of the menu from the canteen. Next slide. You can see the big prices there. Yeah. You can get a sliced egg for 15 cents. Imagine what that sliced egg would cost today. We all know what's going on with eggs. A Coca-Cola was 5 cents. I don't know if you can
Pineapple.
see these from the back of the room or not. The sundaes were all 15 cents. You could get a double dip soda. I think about the most expensive thing I see on there is a 35-cent chicken salad in a lettuce cup or tuna fish salad in a lettuce cup. But obviously this was, banana split was only 25 cents. Wow. Anyway, so they had a lot of opportunities to have some treats there as well. Next slide. With pride and joy, we present to our good health, smiling service, good food, a full wallet, and that date. Getting ready for that date. Like Charlie said, the pilots in training were quite welcome in our communities. Next slide. Make sure I put this one in so you could see what it looked like flooded, as if you all hadn't seen flood pictures before, but this was actually the airfield flooded. And this was during the 1943 flood. We think we can point out a few of the buildings, right, Charlie? You could see the air tower. What was that?
Hangars, perhaps.
The hangar, maybe. Others would just be the dorms and the rec facilities and all the things that we mentioned. Next slide. When the airfield closed, I believe it was in '47, they had a surplus sale. And when I did the presentation over in Chester, had some nice folks that lived in Perryville. She brought me a picture of a table that her brother had purchased at the surplus sale. There's no markings on it. She looked close to see if there was, because I'd be curious if any of us might still have some of that surplus equipment, but it wasn't marked. She brought me also a clip from the newspaper back then that talks a little bit about the during the coming week, the first class aviation cadets are expected to arrive at the Army Flying School at McBride. So, it was definitely in the news in Perryville as well. On the left, on my left there is some information that Bob was able to obtain from the Perry County Military History Museum. Some of those images are in my binder up here, so we really appreciated their help and cooperation with all this, and would encourage you to check out that if you would like some more information. Next slide. Just some additional information. I just mentioned the Perry County Military History Museum. Of course, your local public library. You're welcome to come over to Chester and look at the binder and find out more information there. I'm sure your library here could also help you with some of that information. When I looked up Perryville Regional Airport, they have some really interesting aviation facts and so forth. That might be something you want to check out. Bob was able to find some YouTube videos on some of the training films. Did you want to talk about that, Bob?
Yeah.
So I just did a screenshot to give you an idea of what one of them was.
Since both the Army and the Navy used the steersman as their primary trainer, there are many primary flight training films made by the Army and the Navy that are available on YouTube. You just click onto them and you can watch the whole thing. They have some beautiful pictures of people putting the brakes on the Stearman too quick and bending the propellers and landing on their heads. And they have another shot of one Stearman plowing into the tail section of another one. When you were soloing in this thing from the rear cockpit, you had no idea of what was directly ahead of you. So when you're taxiing, you're doing a series of S turns so you can see off to the side if anything has moved into your path while you're moving. And when you come into land and when you're taking off, you're praying that there's nothing straight ahead of you because you can't see it. You've got a big round engine and a whole bunch of airplane in front of you.
So he was talking about the radial engine. You know, understand the radial, the cylinders went around with, that's the 17. The 19 had an inline engine, so you can see that they had a little better sight out front than with the radial engine.
Now, that was not the only engine that was used, because sometimes if they had trouble acquiring the engine that was in that Fairchild, they would just pull it out and throw another radial engine in front of that too. The military was real good about trying to keep things going by using what was available. And I refer to this airport sometimes as a shake and bake airfield, because they built them all pretty much to the same plan. They used the same materials, and a lot of it was shipped out kind of prefab almost to get things going in a hurry.
Yeah, the company that built it, you know, they started in November, December and finished it in April. And he had contracts throughout the country, and once again they're building 50 of these, so I'm sure there was a lot of pre-cut stuff, and kind of like the Sears homes, you know, it all comes in a kit. I bet a lot of it came on the railroad too.
Are there any buildings still left at the airstrip that are there
Not,
back then?
no, I think all that stuff was sold, I think.
The buildings were taken down?
Yeah.
Yeah, not that we know of for sure. But Bob thought maybe there was a hangar. Is that what you said, Bob?
Somebody had mentioned a hangar, but it may have been replaced in the meantime.
That would definitely be something to check out if you go to one of the activities at the Perryville Regional Airport. I know they have some different public events throughout the year, right, Charlie?
Well, yeah. Mhm.
And that would be a good thing to check out on their Facebook page too. This is just our last slide. You know, we do this presentation in honor and memory of those who studied, taught, and worked at Chester Airfield. Sorry, can't talk now. Again, you know, we're not experts on this. We'd love to talk with you more about it. Bob has a lot of information about all the aviation stuff. Charlie's done extensive research. Happy to go over a little bit more if we went over things too fast for you, but we were trying to keep it moving tonight. So does anybody have any other questions? Anything we can try to answer?
How many flyers we got here?
You got any pilots here?
Well, you know most of what we were talking about.
You
How
gonna-
long did it take you to solo?
8 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say 20 hours seemed a bit much, but if you hadn't done it by then, you were going to wind up as a bombardier or a navigator or something else.
Yeah, but the Stearman was harder to fly. I had one of those for about 2 years. And they were a much more difficult aircraft to fly, especially you were talking about nose heavy and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're easy to get into the air, but they're hard to fly well.
Yes.
If you ever want to see the Stearman that President George Bush qualified in and flew, it's at the Pensacola Naval Station,
And I
Florida.
don't know if everybody could hear that. This gentleman shared that the Stearman that President George Bush qualified in as at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. In there. Yeah.
George Bush Sr.
George Bush Sr. Yes, that's right. We'll get that right. That's
George
very
Yankee
interesting.
smells that.
You what?
George H.
George
H.
H.W., right? He's George H.W. That's what I think
In the
anyway. So.
1960s, they actually had a steerman you could check ride in at Parks Airport, but I don't know what happened to it in the meantime.
One of the things that I found really fascinating when the guy started talking about this is, I just think of an airstrip or landing field as all concrete, but obviously some of the pictures showed that. Do you remember landing on things beside concrete? Did you do that?
I started out in grass strip in St. John.
Did you really? Fascinating. Started out on a grass strip over in St. John, he said. So, wow. I'm sure this gentleman could tell you a little bit more about these airplanes too, so thanks for sharing that. Anybody else have any questions that we can try to answer? Or if you want to come up and take a closer look at some of this information, you're of course welcome to do that. Yeah.
I had a gentleman that worked in my group up in Alton, Illinois, and he was from Pittsburgh. And early in the war, he actually tried out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we were talking one day, and he said he married a girl from Chester. And I said, how did a guy from Pittsburgh marry a girl from Chester? And he was at the flight school.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder who he married. I'm going to have to try to figure that one out.
I'd like to look at your pictures. And
Yeah, see if we can find him.
How many years after it was decommissioned did it recover on the public airport?
So it closed. So the program went away in 44, and it was declared surplus in 47. And like Tammy had mentioned, I don't know for sure, but I believe that the Chester High School had one of the barracks that they converted into a lunch hall downstairs, and upstairs was the band hall, and it's no longer there. But if you looked at that building, you could see that it had a real definite military look. They were all built from the same blueprint, no matter what part of the country they were in. So I don't have much else. Tammy, Bob, thanks for covering for me. I didn't do a very good job.
You did a great job.
So, did we tell all the stories, Bob?
To the best of my knowledge.
We tossed the stick out the cockpit. I like that one.
But can you imagine?
And the hose, communicating with the hose, and bringing down 20 from Parks Air College area and not getting any of them on the ground.
Well, they got them on the ground
I'll just say one.
in less than pristine condition.
I'll just say one more thing. I can't imagine living over in Chester where I live and seeing all these rookie pilots flying around in these planes that they didn't exactly know what they were doing yet all the time. It had to be a little unnerving, wouldn't you think? I wonder, how many accidents they really had. And obviously we didn't find anything in the newspapers that it was really disastrous, but we've heard some stories about some showing off and so forth.
So we had a Centurion die not too long ago, and he said he was a teenager and they were still using horse equipment and such in some of those early years, and he said it wasn't unusual for one of those pilots to come down and land beside you while you're out working in the hayfield and offer to give you a ride or whatever, So wouldn't that have been neat to be back at? And I really wonder where, what their flight pattern was, how far away did they go and all that kind of stuff. So as always, I have more questions than I have answers.
By the way, you'll notice most of these aircraft we have here are painted blue and yellow. This was the paint scheme that the Army and Navy basically used up until spring of 1942, because you will notice those aircraft are all painted silver. That's when the transition was from the blue and yellow to the silver.
So Bob, what did yellow mean?
Yellow was yellow peril. Stay away from it. If you see a flying machine with yellow body and yellow wings, just give them plenty of room. But you never knew what they were going to do.
And we talked about, once again, the distance between the landing gear, how this is a more forgiving landing craft than the Stearman was. But the Stearmans, once again, were made out of structures, and this was made out of fabric and plywood, and not very many of them survived.
Now, I do have one other thing to add. In checking out the Stearman online, I found out that according to the military, it was stressed for 12 G's positive and 9 G's negative. That's enough to pass you out.
You, Steph?
I just often wonder, I mean, you see the smiles and, you know, they were happy to be there training. They came from different parts of our country, and then they ended up over in Europe, and things are quite a bit different over there, I'm sure. So just kind of makes you wonder. They were thrust into that at such a young age, and it's just fascinating. I thought it was fascinating. Bob, Charlie, Tammy, thank you so much. I want to thank Don Heil Oil Company again for being our sponsor for tonight. And of course, Dick Reminger, thank you so much for opening your house here for us as well. Come down and talk to our guests if you like. And
I hope you appreciate the weather we brought.
oh yes, we do. Thank you so much. Brought from the Illinois side.
Something I have to throw out at you. I know we're not talking about here now, but we're talking the B-17s, you know, the European theater. Your tail gunner, he typically made 5 trips. The tail gunner made 5 trips. They were scheduled to do 25 and they could go home. Only 34% made the 25 missions. 64% casualty rate with the B-17s. What do they say about war? War is hell. War is very wasteful.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much, and safe travels going home. Come by and visit us at the St. Genevieve Museum Learning Center.